Well, hello everybody, and thank you for joining me for another chapter in our virtual tour of Israel. And today we're going to go to a place like most of the sites on this session that most people don't go to visit. With this session or this seminar for the last almost 7 sites, this is number 7, we've been to places that most people are not going to, and that was done on purpose. We've been to Masada, which is the most famous site in the country, but all the others were places that most people, unless you have the extra time, are not visiting. And that will include the place that we're going to visit today, which will be Shiloh or Shiloh. Very important location, we have to say. The Bible speaks about Shiloh quite a lot. That was the hub of the Israelites before Jerusalem was chosen to be the one true place of worship. And that was the first place for the nation that we can call a gathering place, a central location. And indeed, through the days of the judges of Israel, the days of Samuel as well, part of it, that will be the only place that the nation got together. Because the question should be in the days of the judges before the monarchy was formed and created, what was in common with the tribe of Asher way up north and the tribe of Simeon way down south? They shared absolutely nothing in common when it comes to the national agenda. And the only thing that was in common was the annual visits to the place of worship, and that was Shiloh or Shiloh. Interesting to know that the Bible doesn't give us a reason why Shiloh was chosen. It speaks about Jerusalem, it speaks about other places. It's just a given that Joshua built the tabernacle in Shiloh without giving us the reason for it. So a few things we don't really know and understand, but the Bible speaks quite a lot about Shiloh as a place that was very active and also as a place that was destroyed. And the prophet Jeremiah is using the example of Shiloh and he speaks about the faith of Jerusalem. The point was basically that it's not where God establishes his name, but it's about the behavior of the people and the obedience of the nation. It wasn't about the tabernacle, it wasn't about a temple, it was about the people's obedience. And the Bible says quite a lot of time that God wants our obedience and not our sacrifices, and that knowing God is better than burnt offering. So it wasn't that much the location as a national behavior, but when it comes to Shiloh, that was a central location that we don't know why it was chosen. Another thing about excavating in Shiloh or Shiloh, as most places in the territories, I did mention that some other time, I'm not sure what was the context, but when Israel is excavating in Judea and Samaria, that many people call Palestinian territories, we call them liberated territories, there is a world, I would say, kind of debate about our right to excavate in places which are not officially part of the state of Israel. And whenever we do, there's always some noise around that, even in Jerusalem. On the other hand, there is a lot of politics in excavations as well. And there are some groups in Israel that will dedicate a fortune to excavate places that fit their agenda and try to promote a certain location over the others. A lot of money is dedicated to do that. And sometimes in those excavations, they don't really follow the international regulations of excavations or archaeology. In the case of Shiloh, and I don't have any picture to show you, but on top of the ancient tel, they've built a big visitor center, which some people like, some people don't like, but you just don't do that. You don't build anything on top of a tel, because if you want to fortify that, you need to drill into the tel for the concrete columns and everything to support that structure. And that's what they did. By building a structure, they also destroyed part of the ancient tel, so there was a need, there was a necessity to promote that. And most of the visitors to the place called Shiloh will be people that come from a certain agenda. I'm talking about Jews, and some Christian groups are going to visit as well. But in order to visit Shiloh today, you have to switch buses into a bulletproof bus, and you're going into the territory, which is absolute nonsense, but some of the bus companies, the insurance won't cover going to Shiloh, so it adds to the adventure. Of course, there's no need to do that, but visiting Shiloh is always something that people are expecting. But again, you only do that when you have the time. But it's an important location, and we don't have a lot of excavations conducted there. And unlike other places in the country, most everything that was found, and I found quite a lot, they don't have it on display yet. And therefore, some of what we're going to speak about are things that I'm going to share with you, but I don't have any visual information for you, not pictures, etc. So we'll see how that's going to work. And for the first time, we're going to go to Samaria. So far, we did not visit any location in Samaria. So we're going to visit Samaria. I'll try to use some of the video segments as well to give you at least an understanding of a place that was the first central location in Israel before Jerusalem was chosen to be the place. Close to 400 years, Shiloh was the central location. That's where the tabernacle used to stand, and that's where the feast of the Lord was celebrated by the Israelites. And of course, the place is connected to Samuel. That's where he spent most of his childhood in the tabernacle. That will be the common denominator to the tribes of Israel before the temple was built in Jerusalem. So that will be the location, that will be the place, and that's the place that we are going to visit today. You know what's going to happen now? I'm going to bring up the presentation, and I need you just one to give me a thumb up to see or to know that you can see what I see in front of me. All right, you do see the slide? Somebody, anybody just say yes, no, so I know that you see, okay, thank you so much. Well, let's start, you know, the opening slide, and let's go and speak about Shiloh. Shiloh or Shiloh, you can use that in both names, and it's mentioned in the Bible for the first time in the blessing of Jacob to his 12 sons. And you go to Genesis 49, and when he blesses his son Judah, he says something like that the scepter will not remove from Judah until Shiloh comes. We do not understand the context of the term Shiloh over there. And when you spell that in Hebrew, since we don't have vowels in Hebrew, the O can be pronounced by or can be spelled by two different words in Hebrew. And you find that one or the other in scriptures. So this Shiloh is most likely not connected to a place. This will be some kind of a title that some scholars do believe is referring to the Messiah. So we do not know what's the connection of Shiloh in the blessing of Jacob and Shiloh, the site of the location. The blessing was delivered in Egypt, to remind you. That's where Jacob had in his life, and Shiloh is here in the country. And therefore, there may or may not be any connection between the first time that Shiloh is mentioned in the blessing of Jacob in Genesis 49 to the very site. So Shiloh is always connected with the tabernacle, not the temple, although sometimes the Bible calls the tabernacle a temple as well. Go figure, some uncertainty, the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, are they connected? The tent of meeting was more kind of portable, you could mobile, move it around as the Bible says, and so was the Ark of the Covenant. The tabernacle was in one place, sometimes the Ark was in another place. They used to take it out from the tabernacle whenever there was a reason to. So even that is not very clear. We don't even know what happened to the tabernacle once the temple was built. Maybe they kind of folded it nicely and stored it in the basements of the temple in Jerusalem. No information is given to us what was the end or what happened to the tabernacle. We know, of course, the Ark of the Covenant, but not what happened to the structure. But that will be the main connection of Shiloh, will be the tabernacle. Here is the map, and we have absolute certainty about identifying the place, identifying the location, because the Bible, which is not very rich with geographical data, gives us almost the exact location. Here is what it says in Judges 19, when it speaks about Judges 21, verse 19, but the Bible speaks about the outrageous story of the Levite and his concubine. It speaks about almost the total destruction of Benjamin, and then they decide to spare the tribe. And I'll just read the story, it's quite an interesting one. But then it speaks about Shiloh in much details. It speaks about the place which is north to Bethel. We know the location of Bethel. I'm reading now from the verse. East of the road that goes from Bethel to Shechem, we know the road. And south of Lebona, this place was also identified, and that points at a certain location. The road that the Bible speaks about is the road of the patriarchs. Today it's called Route 60. When you read about the lives of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, almost everything took place along one road that went along the mountains. Keep in mind the coast was the land of the strangers, the land of the foreigners, the land of the mighty Canaanites, city-states, and Philistines. They tried to avoid mingling with them, and therefore the mountain area would be the hub for the patriarchs and the tribes of Israel as well. So that will be the road easy to identify today. We know the location of Bethel, we know the location of Lebona, we know the location of Shechem, so Shiloh was identified beyond any doubt. The question is, why get so many details in the scriptures? The Bible very seldom will be so specific to try to describe a location in so many details, and there's no good way to understand it but one. Maybe the location was forgotten. There's no need to explain to people today where is New York City. But maybe in about 400 years, New York will not be such a big metropolis, and the focus will move to other big cities. If you want to speak about New York, you need to explain to people where New York is located. So Shiloh was important, and Shiloh maybe was almost totally forgotten. And for that reason, when the books of Judges were written down, that was a few centuries after the events took place, obviously, there was a need to mention to people exactly where was Shiloh located. And for that reason, the Bible goes into so many details. The mountains are the mountains of Samaria, which is one of the hills that makes the backbone of the whole land of Israel. The mountains of Galilee on the north, Samaria, Judea, and the Negev mountains all the way down south. Let me try to bring up a little video, as sometimes we do. And again, I trained and practice and see, maybe it's going to work better this time than it usually works. So I'm going to give it a shot, and we'll see if it works well. You should appreciate me practicing just to make sure that we don't spend that much time in bringing those things up, but to try to see if I did a good job here. We can go straight in.
The mountains of Samaria, the heartland of biblical Israel. 2.5 tribes dwelt in this area. The tribe of Benjamin was south, the tribe of Ephraim, and the half tribe of Manasseh. But the Bible speaks about the northern kingdom of Israel. The heart of that kingdom were the mountains of Samaria. Samaria is only one part of a long mountain range, which is the backbone for the land of Israel. It's Galilee on the northern side, and then the mountains of Samaria and Judea, and the Negev mountains all the way down south into the Sinai Peninsula. Geographically, we are sandwiched between two landscapes which are totally different. The Mediterranean coast is on the western side, and the deep Jordan Valley will be on the east. The name Samaria is mentioned in the scriptures when King Omri is building a new capital for the kingdom, and the Bible says that he purchased the land from Shemer, who was the lord of the mountains. So Shemer and Samaria are basically the same, and that was the name of not just the town, but sometimes the whole kingdom, including the mountains of Galilee. So when you read in the scriptures, the book of Kings, first and some of the second, and you speak about the northern kingdom of Israel, that will be the very heart of it. The town of Shechem, one of the main capitals, is only about 10 miles away. The town of Bethel is not as far away either. Down below me, you see the main routes that went along the mountains of Samaria and the mountains of Judea, all the way down to Beersheba. We call it today the road of the patriarchs. When you go to the book of Genesis and you read about the lives of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, most of their lifetime they stayed on the mountains. They didn't look like that. Everything was covered by thick forests. And when Joshua would conquer the land, the Israelites would have to cut off those trees to make room for themselves to live on the mountains of Samaria. So the landscape is different than it was back then. But in the days of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, nomads, to remind you, that would be the place they used to wander along. Very seldom we read about them leaving the mountains, which were their comfort zone, and mingle with the lowland dwellers along the Mediterranean, which were the Canaanites and other city-states that existed in the area. So we speak about the Israelites, mountain dwellers by nature. That would be the hub of the kingdom, the mountains.
Well, it looks like it worked okay. And this was basically part one. Let me bring up part two for the introduction of Samaria and see if this is going to work now. Don't push it. Sometimes we can be that lucky, but we'll see. Maybe this is going to work fine as well. So give me just a minute. As we said, once you practice, sometimes it works. That should be this one. Let's see if this is working now.
After the northern kingdom was conquered and destroyed by the Assyrians under King Sargon and King Tiglath-Pileser, the Assyrians brought from one of the provinces of the Assyrian Empire called Babylon, back then the province of Assyria, people from 4 cities and settled them on the mountains of Samaria. These will be known by the name Samaritans, and therefore the term was given to them based on the geography. It wasn't an ethnic term back then, and the Samaritans had practiced a certain form of Judaism that was rejected by mainstream Judaism. The open breach was where Nehemiah is building the walls of Jerusalem, and the Samaritans approach him and ask him to participate because they're also Jews and also worship the God of Israel. And Nehemiah says no. And that's what led to this breach between the two. And the Samaritans are not worshiping in Jerusalem. They do not consider Jerusalem to be the most important place, but Mount Gerizim, the Mount of the Blessing. And some of you recall, no doubt, the conversation that Jesus had with a Samaritan woman in the Gospel of John. And you can understand from the conversation the tension between the two, the Jews and the Samaritans. So this will be, from a certain time in history, the hub of the Samaritans that grew to be quite a significant player in the region. They numbered more than 1 million people until their total demise by the Muslims hordes that conquered the area in the 7th century. The land is not that rich. We do have about 25 inches of rainfall every year, but we don't have rivers flowing through here. We have springs. In such a mountainous area, the challenge was not just to catch rainwater, but also to farm the area. And since the valleys are very small and that would not be enough to sustain a large population, you had to know how to divert water to irrigate the hillsides as well. Everything was covered by terraces. In a mountainous area, the only way to survive and to provide more food for the masses is to cover the hillsides with terraces. The terraces had one purpose only, and that was to stop the soil from being washed away. So the soil is washed away, stopped by the terrace, and you create a small stair almost, which has good soil in it, and you can use that for farming as well. And then another one on top, and another one. It will take centuries, or maybe more than that, to complete such a system, but the mountains of Samaria will be covered by terraces as well.
Okay, I think that you got the idea about the landscape of Samaria, but that was indeed the very center of the northern kingdom, and most of the Israelite population that lived in the land was concentrated in the area of Samaria. Let's go back now to the presentation and carry on with Shiloh. So the location was identified beyond any doubt. And let's say a few words about the site itself. And what do we know about Shiloh in the scriptures? Mentioned quite a lot, usually in the book of Joshua, the book of Judges, etc. But again, that's what we read about it for the first time after the conquest by Joshua. It's just given to us as a fact. The only place that the Bible speaks about was a place of offering for the Israelites was Shechem. We do know that Joshua built an altar. That was his first altar in the country, in Shechem. And then suddenly he's moving the tabernacle to Shiloh. We do not have the reason why. But Shiloh will end up in the land of Ephraim, and Joshua was from Ephraim, so maybe he wanted to have a place of worship closer to his own hometown. And I'll tell you later on that when they did the excavations, it looked like Shiloh was an ancient Canaanite place of worship that the Israelites also embraced to be the first location for the tabernacle. So we don't know why, we just know that the fact regarding that. And then the Bible speaks about the annual festival in Shiloh that you saw on the other slide as well, that gives us the location of it. But Shiloh was not just a place for religious gathering, it was a place of gathering for national purposes as well. The Bible mentions Shiloh once again when it speaks about the departure of the Danites and a man by the name of Micah who is building his own God and employs his own priests and has an own kind of small temple, almost like a competition. And the Bible mentions very clearly it happened in the days that the house of God was in Shiloh. Keep in mind, it wasn't really a house. And that's why you have some confusion. It wasn't the tabernacle, the same one that was carried by the Israelites through the desert, which means a mobile structure, but you cannot call it a house. That's why it was called the booth or a tabernacle. Or maybe it was a combination of both. Maybe the foundations were erected from stone and just a layer of fabric were added to the 3 different layers one in scarlet, one in blue, and one in red. So we do not have all the information. We don't even know what's the relation between the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle or the tent of meeting. Are they the same? Maybe three different objects, so not very clear. And different scholars are debating how to understand the tabernacle. Well, as they speak about the gatherings up in Shiloh, this is connected, of course, to Hannah, Samuel's mother, that was barren, the Bible tells us, and she made an oath when she went to Shiloh that if God will give her a son, she'll dedicate him to God. And the high priest Eli told her that God had listened to her prayer, and of course she brings Samuel back and dedicates him to God in the tabernacle of Shiloh. This one is taken from the book of Jeremiah, when Jeremiah is warning the people under the Babylonian siege more than 500 years later. Basically tells them, listen, the fact that you worship the house of God doesn't mean that you're not in harm's way. It's not about the location, not about the house, it's about your behavior. And if you don't believe me, Jeremiah says, I'm using my own words, go and see what I did to Shiloh. Shiloh was a place of worship, and I did not hesitate to destroy that because you misbehaved. And therefore, the place is not important. It's not about the sacrifices, the offerings, or the building. It's about your behavior. So Jeremiah gives the example of Shiloh that most people totally forgotten by then. Maybe for that reason, it was important to the biblical authors to give us the specific description where Shiloh was located. So Jeremiah uses the name as well. And then, again, we speak about another example of Shiloh that you see here. Then I will make this house like Shiloh, which means a place of destruction. So Jeremiah mentions Shiloh twice when he speaks about the terrible faith of the Israelites and the destruction of the first temple. So Shiloh was a place of blessing for a while, but then an example of punishment and the wrath of God as well. Well, once again, abandon the tabernacle in Shiloh. In that context, in Psalms, it says the rest of the verse that God showed Jerusalem to replace Shiloh. And once again, the reason given is not that the location was not nice enough, but the sins of the people. Shiloh was connected to the sins of Eli and his sons, and therefore the place was not worthy to carry on. It was not worthy to have the house of God. For that reason, God chose Jerusalem to replace Shiloh. So different places in the scriptures are mentioning Shiloh in different contexts, either as a center of the nation or maybe as a place of punishment. Another example that Shiloh was used not as a religious center but as a national one is when the 2.5 tribes that helped conquering the land on the western side of the Jordan, after they finished the conquest, Joshua gives them permission to go back to the land that was theirs on the eastern side of the Jordan. And before they are crossing, they build an altar. And that rumor arrives to the Israelites on the western side, and they see that as a challenge. You do not build altars in other places except for Shiloh. And they gather together in Shiloh and decide to go to war against the 2.5 tribes, believing that the 2.5 tribes are going to create a place that will be a competition to Shiloh and maybe to build an image. And therefore, when they confront one another peacefully, fortunately, the 2.5 tribes are telling the others, listen, we did not build that in order to worship idols. We built that as an everlasting memory that we kept our promise. Because the leaders of the tribes made a promise to Moses that if you're giving us the land on the eastern side of the Jordan, we don't try to bail out from the war of conquest. We are going to lead the nation to conquer the western side. But when we are completed the conquest, we'll go back. And we wanted to build this monument to tell our children and our children's children that we kept our promise. So that incident ended peacefully and not violently, but the decision to go to war, civil war basically, was made also in Shiloh. So Shiloh was not just a religious center, it was a national center as well. This one is a strange incident. We speak about after the destruction of the temple and the exile. Jeremiah speaks about a group of 80 people that come from Shiloh. And they go to the temple in Jerusalem to worship, but the temple was destroyed already. Is it possible that they did not know about the destruction? Or maybe this was the first act of mourning over the temple. 80 people that shaved their beards, a sign of mourning, are going to commemorate the temple in Jerusalem, although the temple was in ruins. It's also a possibility. And another important incident, there was a prophet in Judea by the name of Ahijah, the Shilonite. Maybe you remember that he was the one that announced King Jeroboam, before he was made king, that God is going to give him 10 of the tribes of Israel. So Shiloh was maybe destroyed by the Philistines, as we'll suggest in a few minutes, but was rebuilt, no doubt, and the prophet Ahijah also came from the town of Shiloh. So this is some of the places in the Bible, not all of them, that Shiloh is mentioned. The most important event, of course, is dividing the land into pieces. And keep in mind that the eastern tribes got their land before the nation even crossed the Jordan to conquer it. And after all the nation conquered the land, Joshua gathers the people to Shiloh and sends a team because 5 tribes have the land already: Manasseh, Ephraim, and Judah. 7 tribes are still waiting. Simeon was inside Judah, so they did not have any allotment that was inside the land of Judah. And the whole nation gets together, and after the team of 3 members of each tribe are coming back, they simply divide the land into 7 pieces, and they cast lots. And I can see in my wild imagination how Joshua stands at the entrance to the tent of meeting, and the whole nation is seated on the mountains around the tabernacle, and Joshua is calling the leaders one after the other, and maybe they stick their hand into a jar and take up a piece of map and open the map to show the whole people, that's the land God gave us, we're going to inherit it. We do not know if that's how it happened, but you have to have a piece of map, otherwise how to give them directions, which is the land that God gave you. And therefore, that drama of the nation being divided to go to conquer the land or to take the possession of the land also took place in Shiloh, including giving the priests and the Levites their towns as well. Keep in mind that the tribe of Levi did not have an inheritance, and therefore in that occasion, Joshua is also allocating the 48 cities for the priests and the Levites. And from that point on, every tribe has its own inheritance. The Danites will be the ones that will be very unhappy with their inheritance and will switch locations up to a new location called Dan. I believe most of you visited, but all the others stayed in their inheritance until the exile of the land in the days of the Assyrians and then the days of the Babylonians. So the land was now divided. And from that location as well, the ark was taken down to the Battle of Ebenezer. Some of you may recall that incident. Basically, that incident brings the days of the judges to an end, and the nation is demanding a king after a smashing defeat they suffered from. The nation went to war against the Philistines down here. They were losing the war. Somebody said, let's go and bring the Ark of the Covenant from Shiloh, because if God is with us in the camp, we'll surely win. And somebody is going back to Shiloh and takes the ark into the camp. The Philistines are afraid from the presence of God, and they say, this is the God that defeated the Egyptians. We're going to be totally destroyed. But instead of saying, run for your lives, they say, let's fight like men. Let's die like men. And they win the battle, and they seize the ark for 7 months. Well, that drama also took place here in a place called Afek. And from here, the Philistines went up the mountains and destroyed Shiloh. The Bible doesn't say that specifically, but in the excavation, they found a big layer of ashes to indicate the big fire from the 11th century BCE. So know that that's how it happened. By the way, the distance between Ebenezer and Shiloh is about 26 miles. So we always like to say that the first marathon runner was not the one in Greece that went from marathon back to Athens to speak about the great victory, but it was a Benjamite that ran back to Shiloh and brought the news about a terrible defeat. Maybe that was indeed the first marathon. And some scholars will even go to say that this was Saul himself, a Benjamite. We speak about the same days of King Saul as a young man, give or take. We don't know. These are all speculations. I'm only telling you what the Bible says. The rest is commentary, and everybody can make his own opinion about everything and be as right as everybody else. So these are the places in the Bible that Shiloh is mentioned. And of course, the most important one will be the tabernacle and of course the first years of Samuel. This is just to bring that to conclusion about the significance of Shiloh. Well, let's go and speak about the site a little bit, excavations. Well, they started in 1838. There was an American archaeologist by the name of Robinson. He was the first one that explored the country, let's say the modern era, and left behind some detailed description about what he had identified. He was the one to identify Masada, for example. So this is the first book written in such details about different locations, and based on the Bible and how accurate it was, he came to the conclusion that this was indeed Shiloh. He did not excavate anything. Back then, excavations were not very common. Archaeology is a soft science, so to speak, and they only started excavating in the beginning of the 20th century. So the first professional dig took place by a team from Denmark. Denmark here, it was a Danish archaeologist that had 6 years of excavations. Problem is he died of a disease in Jerusalem, and all of his discoveries were lost. Nobody knows what happened to them. It was the whole caravan that carried all the goods that he excavated from Shiloh to Jerusalem, and along the way something happened. Maybe it was robbed, lost, we don't know. So we only have his reports, but nothing that he found. And after the war of 1967, there was another team from the University of Bar Ilan, the religious university, that made a survey of the mountains of Samaria. They came to the following conclusion. From Middle Bronze Age, which is correspond to the days of Jacob and maybe Isaac and Abraham, they found about 60 sites in the area of Samaria. So the place was very scarcely populated. From the days of Joshua and on, 150, that's a clear evidence that the Israelites are also occupying the mountains and build more communities. And from the days of the monarchy, 190 different sites, each one indicates a village or a small town. So the local population was close to 1 million or so in the days of the monarchy as well. They did discover massive walls that were covered, right? They just excavated them and covered them as well to build the big visitor center on the very top. I couldn't find a single picture of them, but I read a report from 1984, basically, and they speak about massive walls that were found that predating the days of Joshua. The walls encompass an area of about 5 acres, and again, what was found in the dig will indicate that this was a place of worship. They found a lot of oil lamp, they found a lot of bones of animals, all concentrated in one location. So they were not just breeding, flocks or the herds in the area. It was get together in a certain area. They found a lot of artifacts that will indicate a place of worship. For example, if you find a lot of things made of clay that were destroyed or smashed to the ground and were buried in one location, that will indicate a place of worship, because the tradition was in Israel as well, that if you bring your offerings, you bring them in different cooking pots and in different artifacts made of clay, which you smash down to the ground. You only make them for one reason, to use them as an offering, and you no longer use them. That was the tradition in Israel as well. So when you find that large number of pieces of clay in one location, that's one indication. So long before the days of the Israelites, the place was known to be a place of worship, and maybe that's why Joshua chose that location. We don't even say that God ordered Joshua. It's just a given that they built the tabernacle in Shiloh. What you see down below here are the mosaic floor of a church. And the place was built, 2 churches were built here in the 4th century, and Shiloh was on the route of all the pilgrims that came to the country. It is mentioned in the books of fathers of the church, encouraging people to go to visit Shiloh, that important Shiloh was. And keep in mind, in the 1st centuries, before the days of Constantine, Jerusalem was out of reach. Christian pilgrims came to Israel, they could not go to Jerusalem. It was not open for Jews or Christians alike. So Shiloh was the only holy place they could visit. And that's what made Shiloh such an important site on the route of the pilgrims that came to the country. The map of Medeba, that's another interesting source. It was found in a place on the eastern side of the Jordan River in Medeba, which is a site in Jordan, the country of Jordan. And this is dated to the 2nd half of the 5th century. It's quite a large mosaic map, 2.5 million stones in it that shows the area of Israel. And Shiloh is also mentioned. They mention about 150 names on it, and Shiloh will be located someplace around here. And if Shiloh is mentioned, it was a place of significance, although it was in ruins for centuries by then. But since it was built to show the important places in the country, here in Jerusalem, for example, way out of proportion, Shiloh is also mentioned in the map of Medeba. Well, the tabernacle, as we said, this is the most important thing, and that's where the tabernacle was located. I'll show you a short video in just a minute. Not all the scholars agreed. There was a big debate where exactly was the tabernacle. 2 options. One, it was on top of the tel of Shiloh, which is possible. because most of the retaining walls and most of everything that was found very close to the top. This is not the top. This is basically on the slopes. The counter argument will say that even Jerusalem looks like that topographically because it's not on the mountaintop. It's down in the natural arena, so people can sit on the mountains around and see what happens down below them. So that would be how it looks like today. They were able to identify the leveled area and surrounded by fences. And those walls or terraces, and these walls and that whole compound is very close to the dimensions which are given in the scriptures for the dimensions of the tabernacle. The problem is that the Bible speaks in cubits. We do not fully understand cubits today. There was a standard cubit, there was a royal cubit, but it's one possibility that that's where the tabernacle used to stand. I'll be quick to admit not all the scholars agree, and that's what the political agenda kicks in to choose a certain location and totally be, you're not debating about anything else. Say this is it, and there's no question about that. Well, there are two churches built in the 4th century in Shiloh. One was called the Pilgrim's Church and one the Basilica. One of the fathers of the church, Jerome, is mentioning them, and so is Eusebius. Look at that motif. Look at the Star of David that you find in the mosaic in the church. Well, this is only to tell you that the Star of David was not a Jewish symbol. It's a nice mosaic, nice decorations. We speak about a symbol that was used in other cultures as well, originated in India. It's a different story. We're not going to speak about it now, but to find that kind of brings it to your attention. How come there was a Jewish symbol? Well, the reason is it was not a Jewish symbol back then, but until the 14th, 15th century, the Star of David, or the Jewish star, was attributed somehow to the Jewish people. They found a lot of olive presses, and that will indicate a lot of trade in the area, manufacturing olive oil also for purposes of worship, just like Mount of Olives provided all the olive oil needed for the temple rituals in Jerusalem, so the Shiloh area that provided all the olive oil needed for the tabernacle rituals, as long as it was up in Shiloh. They found hundreds of jars about this size, some of them they left behind, but you do see that, which means that Shiloh was not just a place for religious gathering. You do know that in the temple later on, and the tabernacle as well, the priesthood came to serve. Every division came to serve in the tabernacle 2 weeks every year, if that was indeed the case back then, and they needed accommodations. And therefore, Shiloh was not just the tabernacle, the whole town was developed around the tabernacle, and that's where the priests used to live. And when people came for the celebrations, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, they needed some facilities, and these were basically central facilities to sustain the people that came for the visit. The Bible speaks about Elkanah from Ramah that brought his 2 wives and his children every year, Hannah and Penina. I'm sure that you know the story. So it was just one out of many. And that's how the place used to look like, the massive tail. And some scholars do believe that the tabernacle stood on top of the hill and not on the other location that I showed you. Well, let's try to bring up the last one from here. And you have to agree with me that this time it was working quite well. So maybe finally I figured out how to do it correctly. Just a minute, bring it low here and see if I have it here with me. Yep, there it is. It's about 3 minutes, and I hope that you can all see that.
I'm standing now on the slopes of the ancient hill of Shiloh or Shiloh. The Bible very seldom gives us enough geographical data to point at a certain location and to know it beyond any doubt. For some reason, it describes Shiloh with some details. It speaks about the location that was north to Bethel, and Bethel was identified beyond any doubt about 10 miles down south. It speaks about a place which is east of the main road, and the road is down below you, so we're east of the main road. And it even mentions another town called Lebona, which is believed to be on the hill of that direction. So the Bible gives us enough information to point at one location and to know beyond any doubt that was indeed Shiloh. And this was a place that for nearly 400 years, the tabernacle was standing. Long before Jerusalem was chosen to be the one place of worship, and that will only happen in the days of David. Through the whole days of Joshua and the judges, nearly 400 years, the place that the Israelites used to come together in order to worship God in the holidays would be here in Shiloh. And down below, over that direction, there was a section over there. That's where the tabernacle used to stand. They've been excavating here for a few years now, and what was found over there fits the dimensions the Bible speaks about regarding the tabernacle. The orientation was east and west, just like the temple would be, and just like it was during the wanderings in the desert. So there's no reason to doubt that that would be the location for the tabernacle. We do know that this was the place where Joshua sent the team to survey the land and divide it to 7 pieces for the 7 remaining tribes. And after they did, the whole nation gathered down here, and that may explain also the place that were chosen based on topography. In many civilizations, the holy places will be located on the mountaintop, not in Shiloh and not in Jerusalem, interesting. The place of worship is down in a huge natural arena, so people can sit on the mountains all around. So that shouldn't be that difficult to visualize how the tribes of Israel, very anxious to know what land God gave them, are covering the hillsides. And Joshua stands down at the tabernacle, and he's calling the leaders one after the other, casting lots, no doubt. And every leader got a piece of map, most likely, and Joshua will tell them, this is the land God gave you. You go and inherit the land. So that will be a major drama as the land is being divided to the tribes of Israel. 5 tribes got their territory before that incident, but 7 of them did not have any land yet. So dividing the land of the tribes to go and conquer took place right here in Shiloh, right here in the tabernacle. The place is connected to the story of Samuel as well. Eli was the high priest when Samuel grew up as a kid in the tabernacle. That's what the promise Hannah made. If she's going to have a son, as Eli promised her, he's going to be dedicated to God.
Okay, I'm stopping that one here. And we're going to bring the presentation about Shiloh to conclusion in a few minutes. I'll be quick to admit it's not rich with artifacts as other places in the country. And as I said, there are some reasons to that. Some is politics, and some is international debate about the right of Israel to excavate. Sometimes you excavate a site and you store everything in storehouses someplace, and sometimes, hard to believe, it's simply forgotten. If you're a scholar that you have a place allocated for you to excavate, and you bring a team with you and you spend a few years in a certain location, and you didn't find much, and you want to write your report, it's not the only project that you're engaged in. Most of these guys are professors in universities, and they need to teach the students. Sometimes, I know it sounds amazing, they just can't find the time to write an official report and to have all those rich discoveries made in places, but everything is stored in the storehouses, and somebody tries to find the money to build the visitor center and to have places of things on display, and it takes time. When it comes to Judea, Samaria, other places, excuse me, that are connected to some political issues, it may take even longer. And in Israel, there are a couple of funds and groups which are supported by money, not by the government, by money from the Jewish world, that have an agenda of some kind to try to promote a certain place that they want to excavate. So Shiloh was not a place that people go to visit recently. And again, there is a debate in the country among archaeologists to what an extent you want to rebuild the place and how many resources you want to pour in order to change the nature of it. And some will say when it comes to an excavation, the tell you should not build anything on it, but next to it or around it. And therefore it was done in Shiloh to build a visitor center on top of the tell is all wrong. So again, a few ideas, and nobody knows the exact location, but we know Shiloh. We know the location of the town, although we may not know the exact location of the tabernacle. But to point out a place and to say, you know what, Samuel lived right here at this part of his life. And that's where God called him on a mission. And that's where Eli died, and his 2 sons that died in battle not far away. And to see the tribes of Israel occupying the hillside as Joshua is calling the tribe leaders down to the tent and gives them a piece of land. And the leader goes back to the tribe and shows them the land, and everybody is packing everything up and go to inherit the land that was conquered already, but nobody knew what land you're going to get. That would be a vivid picture to understand basically the forming of a nation. coming from Egypt after 40 years in the desert, conquering a land finally, and every tribe is going to occupy the place that they conquered earlier. That will be one of the most important events in the life of the nation. Well, this will be it for today, and please feel free to unmute yourselves if you wish, and if you have any questions about Shiloh, I'll be more than happy to address anything that you would like to know about the place. Next time that you come, if you do have the time, it's really worth a visit because Samaria, it's really nice to see, just to drive through the countryside. And this is one place in Israel that you can still have the feel of the biblical nature of the land. You go to Tel Aviv, you go to Jerusalem, you have the high rises everywhere, not Starbucks, but the Israel equivalent and coffee shops, and so vivid, so modern. Sometimes it's hard to get the true feel how the land used to look like. When you go to Samaria, occupied predominantly by Arab villages, it's not uncommon to see an Arab farmer using a very old-looking plow, just like it was back in the days of the patriarchs. So the tribes of Israel still happens, and good donkeys are everywhere. So this is one place in the country you can still have a feel of what was biblical Israel like, covered with terraces. And again, just an opportunity to see that part of the country that usually we do not include on an ordinary tour. Come on, folks, next week we go to Jerusalem. You do know that we are quarantined now, and therefore we cannot leave our homes. So I need to check and see if I have any video segments on the walls of Jerusalem. Next week, we're going to speak about the walls and the gates of Jerusalem, speaking about the walls historically, and of course, the gates of the city today. And I hope I'll have enough video footage as well. Otherwise, it will be all me talking and pictures. So maybe I can sneak out without being arrested and just go to see what happens in Jerusalem with the camera. If you don't see me next week, that means that I'm someplace in jail in the country. I'll let you know, of course. Everybody's keeping the closure tightly enough. Police set roadblocks, and they try to keep people to be more obedient. We had 9,000 cases yesterday, 9,000 cases of infection. We still hold the world record, unfortunately. Come on, folks. Anything that you'd like to know?
I just have a comment, Ronnie.
Yes, Kelly.
I was listening to Dennis Prager today, and we actually traveled with him when we came to visit Israel last December. And one of your colleagues was being interviewed, and his name is Aria Leifert. Do you know him?
No, sorry.
Leifert. Well, Dennis was very complimentary about how tour guides, and I absolutely concur, are not just American tour guides, in Israel. I mean, you all are scholars, and you are very studied. So anyway, he was just as well saying how hard the tourism industry has been hit in Israel, and how they just are not anticipating any major improvement for a while. I guess he said,
No, it wasn't hit hard. It's dead.
Yeah.
I mean, totally. Yeah. And now the few people that still went see places, Israelis, that travel, because we were not able to travel. So July and August, which is the summer break in the country, of course, people usually go places around the world. So there was a little period of time of blessing because people stayed in the country. So that really helped some of the hotels, not the rest of the industry. But it was one reason for another outbreak of the infection, of the pandemic. You go to a hotel and they tried to have capsules, and you could not go to the buffet to take food. You had to be served to the table. They tried to have all kind of measures to try to control it, but it really didn't work. And the kids went back to school, and that basically made everything worse. Well, listen, I know that today, I think that Moderna made a statement that their vaccine is working on adults as well. And Israel maybe was clever enough to anticipate that they're going to be the first one to develop the vaccine, and Israel made a deal with them. So before Moderna is supplying the rest of the world, maybe the first one, but I do believe that we are going to wait in Israel to our own companies to make the local vaccine. So we'll see how it's going to work. But few things have to come together. People need to be comfortable to fly and go places away from home. I know that among evangelical Americans, you're not considering things to be dangerous and you will come no matter what. But Israel will not let people come in You have to be quarantined for 14 days, and who will come under such circumstances? Because there are flights, but it will take time. The groups are going to be smaller. They're going to limit how many people can fit in a bus. So if you have 40 people that still want to come, it will have to be 2 buses, which means the rooms in the hotel, the same number of rooms, but it's an extra bus and an extra guide as well. Right now, we do have the guides on the buses because, again, everybody's unemployed basically. But if it goes back to normal, many of my colleagues, the younger colleagues, in my age, to find another job, it won't be easy for me. But some of the younger guys that understand that maybe it's going to take a long time, they have families that they need to support basically.
Well, yes.
They found other jobs already. And therefore for them to go back to the tourist industry, they will, because once you're a tour guide, I think that this will be your main ambition. It's really fun. And I do believe that we enjoy what we do. So we are, how many people can honestly say that we like our job? I don't know. But in our case, we like what we do. And if we make a contribution to the country as well, and we're serving the country well, in presenting Israel in a decent way, that's even a bonus. And therefore, once the industry is going to recover one way or the other, many people that left tour guiding will go back. But it will take a time. It will take some time. And for the hotels,
that was one of his points today, how much he did love his job, and that he used the word humiliated, taking money from the government. He just wants to get back to work to be able to support his family.
Yeah, well, I don't know about humiliation, but you pay taxes, and that's how it's supposed to work in a normal system. So we'll see. We'll see how things are going to develop. And one way or the other, it's going to go, maybe not totally back to normal. Maybe it will take some time, but we'll see.
Well, we're certainly pulling for you all, and just so sorry. It's been so difficult over there. I mean,
again, we're not the only sector that was really hit hard. Think about, even big gatherings like weddings and whatever, parties, and movie theaters are closed. There are no shows of any kind. So many people were affected by that. Well, the question is, again, let me be a little philosophical, right? How are we going to be prepared for next time? I mean, this time it happened already. I hope that people that need to learn the lesson. And the big test is going to be what we're going to do next time. And there will be a next time, unfortunately, and countries have to be prepared. And Israel, we know emergencies, right? We know how to function under an emergency. That's Israel was born in emergency. I'm in that stage ever since. It always makes me smile when I hear in America that you are red alert or yellow alert. We are on top alert all the time. So we have to switch levels of alert. And to respond in such a poor way, we're disappointed. All right. And again, I understand it's politics. Maybe next time they will let the professionals take over, and politics will not be part of it. And they will function in a much better way than we do so far. Any other things about Shiloh, about Samaria, about... Okay, well, I gave you a chance. Again, it's
always that,
it's
Ronny.
a place that you can do some reading about. But once again, one of the frustration is that some places in Judea and Samaria, they just don't publish a full report. And some politics is part of it. And what was found, you don't have it on display. So, you need to read the report of the professionals, very boring, and try to kind of take out of it something that you can actually use to have more color to it. But when you go to visit the site, there's not that much to see. They have a visitor center over there. But besides that, not that much. And they're excavating all the time. But once you say, listen, this excavation is politically oriented, it will not get enough attention from professionals because you can't trust the outcome because they have an agenda. So some people view the dig as people that had an agenda, and therefore you cannot really trust their result, although the people that do the excavations are well-known archaeologists. So again, it's one of those debates in the country to what an extent we believe in what was found there and how much of it was motivated by a political agenda. Well, go figure. But we have enough material to point to the place to say this was indeed Shiloh, and we know that beyond any doubt. Weren't you impressed with the videos, how quickly it happened this time?
Yes.
I'm telling you, I'm learning.
You've got some time on your hands. You've clearly been practicing.
Yeah, well, we have to sometimes because I always feel embarrassed when it doesn't work. So yeah, I guess now I know
you're
how to
doing
do it.
great.
Well, folks, if there's no other question, thank you for joining me. And have a wonderful, what is it now, Thursday, wonderful weekend. Some of you are going to meet tomorrow night for the final sessions in the seminar that we call the Greco-Roman Judea. Yep, and tomorrow we're going to also speak about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for those that will join me for the seminar. It's going to be a great time. Have a great
It
evening,
will be.
everybody. And
Thank you.
I'll see some of you tomorrow and the rest of you next week. Bye-bye. May the God
Thanks,
of
Ronny.
Israel richly bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.